Who is on your Mount Rushmore of metal artists? Now, my buddy Mark's Metal Minute posited that question to me, and he came up with his 4 metal artists on his Mount Rushmore. It's 3 vocalists and 1 guitarist. Now, all-time metal Mount Rushmore is too daunting a task for me. So what I've decided, I've come up with my 4 artists for my Mount Rushmore from birth until I was in 4th grade. Now you say birth, that's preposterous. You couldn't possibly have been listening to metal when you were born. Yes. When I was in diapers, I was listening to metal. Before I could talk, I was listening to metal. And the first artist in my Mount Rushmore is a guitarist. And I'm going to go ahead and let you all in on a secret. I have no vocalist on my Mount Rushmore, a metal artist from birth through 4th grade. Guitarist is Ace Frehley. Now, I have a brother. He's a Kiss memorabilia, expert. And when he was older, over the past few decades, he put out albums by members of Kiss: Peter Criss, Eric Carr, Bruce Kulick, and Ace Frehley. When I was young, I only had a few albums, and all the albums I had were gifted to me or I got them at yard sales. The first 2 albums I had were Kiss's Destroyer and Ace Frehley's solo album. So Ace Frehley, who I dressed up as for Halloween multiple times, who I dressed up as and had my face painted as for multiple talent shows in elementary school. Ace Frehley is my first face on my Mount Rushmore of early metal. My next face is another artist from one of the first records that I had. It's Angus Young. Now, I was really locked in on AC/DC's Flick of the Switch. That was my first AC/DC album. Also, Back in Black came out around that time, and Fly on the Wall also. But I really enjoyed the Bon Scott era stuff too, so I didn't want to just pick Brian Johnson, and Angus Young's on so many of their album covers, and he's so iconic. So Angus Young is my second head up on my Mount Rushmore of early metal. The third one was really, really tough for me. I thought about doing Ozzy Osbourne. Strong consideration for another artist who I dressed up as and performed in talent shows in elementary school, Alice Cooper. And also a heavier artist who was super impressionable upon me, Kronos. But as I said, there's no frontmen on my Mount Rushmore from birth to 4th grade-ish. So the third artist, I was really big into hair and glam metal back then. So I thought about Bon Jovi, not so much. Thought about Rat, not so much. Motley Crue. Even though they're not very heavy, Motley Crue is who I would pick for the third head on Mount Rushmore. I was absolutely wild about Shout the Devil. I think in the 2nd grade, I had on a Shout the Devil hat and my school picture, with the Baphomet on it and whatnot. And of course, I was wildly into Theater of Pain, as most kids were back at that time. So that's Vince Neil. So I'm not Vince Neil, sorry. I didn't tell you who I would have from Motley Crue up on my Mount Rushmore. It would not be Vince Neil. I was going back and forth between Nikki Sixx, who is quite the commanding presence, like Gene Simmons and Sid Vicious, but I settled on Tommy Lee. He just embodies the glam and hair metal lifestyle. And, I vicariously lived through Tommy Lee various periods of my life. And the final head, the 4th head up on Mount Rushmore from birth through 4th-ish grade, it's going to be Eddie. That's right. It's not a band member. It's Eddie, the Iron Maiden mascot. Now, why in the world do I have a mascot on there? Well, to be honest, I never would have listened to Iron Maiden growing up if it weren't for Eddie on those album covers. Peace of Mind was one of the first albums that I had it, on vinyl. Number of the Beast was super impressionable on me. I thought about Bruce Dickinson, but I like the Paul material as well. And, Power Slave's another album that was super, super important for me growing up. Seventh Son of Seventh Son, I think it was a little later, and Stranger and Strangeland also was probably a little later. One of my favorite shirts back then that I wore in at least one school photo was my Iron Maiden Live After Death shirt. But, they were super progressive and more avant-garde than the other bands that I previously mentioned. But definitely Eddie is the fourth head on my early, from birth through fourth grade, Mount Rushmore medal. So drop in the comments, who would be on your Mount Rushmore medal? Now, most of y'all probably weren't listening to metal as young as I was, but like the first ones, I want to hear those. Let me know. Drop in the comments. And check out Mark's post. It was very adventuresome of him to, take on 4 all time. I disagree with all his. I'd probably have one of his 4 in my all time Mount Rushmore, and it probably wouldn't take you very long to figure out which one of the 4. All right, cheers.